Hello YouTube watchers, welcome back. If you're a returning watcher and haven't yet subscribed, what's stopping you? So something a little different for today. I'm going to be doing a two-part story time video, but don't worry, we're still dealing with the criminal element. Just figured we should take a break from Chris Watts. So today I'd like to tell you about one of my more interesting jobs, which I thought you would find interesting, because it was affected by the release of a high-profile serial killer. The business involved assisting people who had been convicted of criminal offenses obtain a pardon, or as they're now referred to, record suspensions. And the purpose of either, both the same, is to hide someone's criminal record. And during that time, I came across some really interesting characters. I'd like to discuss 4 files in particular that I remember. And these were individuals who had charges ranging from shoplifting to the sexual abuse of children, so some pretty heavy stuff. Before I discuss those cases though, I think it's important to give you some backstory on the pardons process and also the backstory of a major event that changed the rules around eligibility. So I'm not sure how things are done in other countries. My experience is with the Parole Board of Canada, and it's from about 10 years ago. And I say this because the laws and requirements surrounding parole and pardons do change quite regularly, and the reasons why will become very clear as I touch on this one high-profile case. And some of you may have heard of it or may know of it as the year was 2010, June. I was in between careers and took a bit of a detour from what I had planned to do when a former boss recommended me for a job. He said I'd be great at it. He was wrong. The job involved opening up a new office for a pardons and waivers business. That part I was okay with. I was a little apprehensive though, knowing that I would be dealing with convicts all day, which the couple that hired me may have suspected, because they allayed my concerns by letting me know that a large majority of the people that applied for pardons, they were just coming in with simple assaults and drunk driving charges, nothing serious. So I took the job. Fast forward about a month to the opening of the new office. I'd hired 2 young girls, and this is going to become important in my part 2 of story time. So I believe the one was studying law, the other one was working towards or pursuing a degree in social work. Both were in their early 20s, and after a week of training, we started to intake clients. But these clients were looking to get pardoned for more than your garden variety drunk driving charges. And stay tuned, because you're going to find out why. Now, the objective or intention behind allowing criminals to suspend or hide their record is so that they may go on to lead a normal life after serving their sentence. Otherwise, they could, in theory, be tempted to reoffend, because having a criminal record can negatively impact your life and hold you back from moving ahead. For example, many jobs require that you submit to a criminal record check. I myself had to do that to obtain a business license when I opened up my business. And even volunteering or belonging to some organizations, you're required to submit a criminal record check. So another impact or restriction on your life may surround travel. An example for many Canadians would be if you were to try to cross the border from Canada into the US with a criminal record, you may get turned back. And this applies whether you're traveling for business or for pleasure. And it's particularly true if you've been convicted of a crime of moral turpitude. And those crimes involve murder, serious assault, rape, robbery, fraud, anything that causes serious harm to another person. So people with drunk driving offenses, that's kind of a gray area depending on who you ask. and many have been known to slide through depending on the mood or beliefs of the customs agent, and also how slick you are at talking your way out of a situation. Now, customs agents don't always ask if you have a criminal record or search even. That would probably slow down custom lines considerably. It seems to be done quite randomly, actually. I've never personally been asked, but I do know people who have been asked. And if you are asked and you do have a criminal record, then you have a problem. You will forever be flagged at the customs border, at the US border. And you may need to obtain a special waiver to enter the US from that point on, which is not only time consuming, it's expensive. And I think the same thing works from, like, if US citizens are trying to cross the Canadian border, but I don't know the ins and outs of that process or the consequences. But anyhow, it won't matter if you subsequently get a pardon after being flagged. Once you're flagged for life. And not only that, but entry tightened after the events of 9/11, and should another similar event occur, God forbid, but US laws could change again, and those people who were flagged may be refused entry waivers altogether. There are a few circumstances where you would not be eligible for a full pardon. If you're convicted of murder, your record will not be hidden. If you've been convicted of 3 or more indictable offenses, your record will not be hidden. If you were convicted of a sexual crime, your record will not appear in a general police check, but will always appear in a vulnerable sector search, which is screening for people who may be working with or have contact with children, the elderly, or disabled people, so people who are vulnerable. Having said that, even if you are eligible, it's not a guarantee that you're going to get a pardon or record suspension. Depending on what you're convicted of, different offenses have different terms of parole, which must be fulfilled, obviously, before one can apply to have their criminal record hidden. At the time I started, indictable offenses, which are more serious and carry a term of 2 years plus a day or longer in prison, required a 5-year waiting period before you could apply for a pardon. The less serious or summary convictions with shorter prison terms or probation had a 3-year waiting period. And of course, any restitution owed, negative drug and alcohol tests if required, counseling, anger management classes, community service, which may have been ordered, would have to have been completed before starting the application. Okay, I won't go into the whole process of applying for a pardon or a US entry waiver. I'll just give you the very, very broad overview. So the first step is to get your fingerprints taken, which are sent off to the RCMP, that's the Federal Police in Canada, which are then run through a database, and the report is sent back weeks later with your complete criminal record. The work then begins for me. And there were many time-sensitive steps involved, especially if you had multiple convictions in different jurisdictions. You would need to submit applications to each local police department and court to obtain your records for each case or each conviction. And of course, fees apply for each record. So if your convictions and arrests occurred in the same howdy-doody small town police department or court, you could typically get those records pretty quickly. But if you committed a crime in, say, a large city like Toronto, it could take considerably longer to get your records. If I remember correctly, the whole process of receiving a pardon took about a year, give or take a few months. So most people, if they were really keen, would apply 6 months or so prior to their waiting period expiring, assuming they had fulfilled all of their requirements of their parole. While I was going through my training and learning the business, there was a lot of buzz in the news about a woman named Karla Homolka. This is her taking some sexy time photos in her minimum security prison cell. Now, she's the Barbie in the Ken and Barbie killers. She was part of a couple that was involved in the abduction, drugging, sexual assault, torture, and murder of at least 3 teenage girls in the early 90s. One of them was her own sister. And I believe some of these assaults were videotaped. Karla cut a deal with the prosecutors and testified against her husband. In exchange, she got 12 years for manslaughter, whereas her husband was convicted of first-degree murder, among other charges, I'm sure. When she was released in 2005, she moved to a small French-speaking town in the province of Quebec and tried to change her name to that of a typical French person in order to blend in and obtain some anonymity. From what I've read, her first attempt to change her name was denied. However, I do know she goes by a different name today. So either by marriage or eventually they did let her change it. I don't know. But anyhow, shortly after her release, she married, and believe it or not, has 3 children. Next thing you know, it's 5 years later, and she's suddenly eligible for parole. And this happened to coincide with my first week on the job. When the public found out this woman could apply for a pardon, they were absolutely outraged. And lawmakers scrambled to put together a bill that would block her from being able to obtain a pardon. The effect of this was that every pardon application that was in progress was suddenly put on hold, because the bill that was set to be passed was going to affect waiting periods for all other offenses. The people who had committed more serious offenses, referred to as indictable offenses with a sentence of more than 2 years, who previously had to wait 5 years, now had to wait 10 years. And those with less serious offenses, referred to as summary convictions with sentences of less than 2 years, or probation, who previously had to wait 3 years, now had to wait 5 years. And I think lesser offenses, anything having to do with like marijuana, say, their wait period remained at 3 years. And in fact, I think since marijuana has been decriminalized, the process of erasing your record or suspending it is even easier. So anyhow, with those impending changes, people who were convicted of serious offenses started coming out of the woodwork. They wanted to get their applications in before this bill had passed, and they would, have to wait 10 years as opposed to the 5 years. So this meant I was dealing with sexual offenders, and as part of the application process, I had to gather all of the details of their offenses and put it in a report. And some of the details were quite unsettling and difficult for me to process, and I didn't want to help them, to be honest. I'm going to stop part 1 here. If you've enjoyed today's video and look forward to hearing about some actual files I worked on, or if you're interested in hearing more about the Canadian serial killer Karla Homolka, press the thumbs up and leave your comments and questions below. I'll do my best to respond. Meanwhile, for those of you who are new to my channel, I'll pop a link to my Letters to Chris Watts series over here, somewhere on the screen, along with the subscribe button. So as always, thanks for watching.